In case you haven't noticed, there's a war on, and the target of this war is you and me. But did you know that this fight was first fought in heaven? It's the war against the saints, and it's coming up next as Arkansas Alive starts right now. As I occasionally do, I would like to give you what Paul Harvey called the rest of the story. I'd like to start with some incidents, issues that have been going on for several weeks, months now, and bring us up to the current situation that took place in El Paso and Dayton. And I want you to see from a biblical perspective what's going on, why, and how to deal with it. And that's why I like to bring you commentary every once in a while and take issues that are current events and look at them from a biblical perspective. And I hope this helps you. First, let's go back to May, right here in Arkansas, and I'm holding up a copy of the August issue of Arkansas Money and Politics magazine. And this article that I'm going to read from was written by Tyler Hale, I assume of the staff of this magazine. And there are different comments from different people. And first, let me read this comment at the end of the article. It says, despite the destruction unleashed by Mother Nature, others are preparing for a new day with the conviction that it will shine brighter for Arkansas. Well, first of all, and this is not a criticism or judgment, but an explanation. There is no such person as Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a figment of somebody's imagination. It's always related closely to God. I always used to say, Mother Nature is not God's wife. But Mother Nature gets blamed for a lot of things that happen. But according to this article and the research and the information here, LRPA Executive Director Brian Day says there are 100 barges that are still waiting to come upstream to pass through the port. Tugboats are slowly bringing in the barges into the port, but it will require weeks to restore the traffic to normal levels. Day says it will probably be 6 to 8 weeks before the river traffic can resume. And a University of Arkansas study estimates that every day the Arkansas River is closed for business. It's costing $23 million in lost revenue. Now, Mother Nature did not produce this catastrophe or this tragedy. Here is the factual information. And VTN was able to assist through generous donations of our broadcasters. We were able to assist some people who lost just about everything they had. We were able to replace their appliances, their furniture, etc. So we went out into the river valley and we visited some of these people. We saw the destruction, and it's tantamount. And one of the ladies of the family that we visited, she said, you know, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers told us that to get ready for maybe 4 to 6 inches of excess water. She said it turned out to be 4 feet of water. Now, listen to this. While the flood had a major impact on Arkansas, in late May, a high-pressure system, a weather ridge, built up over northeast Oklahoma, dropping 15 to 20 inches of rain over the state. The elevated rainfall created a dangerous situation at the Keystone Lake near Sand Springs, Oklahoma. Now, what the engineers told the lady who was a flood victim, down in Redfield, she said they told her they could not let the city of Tulsa flood, so they were going to open the gates to this dam. The Keystone Dam at its peak is an elevation of 771 feet, facing a wall of water measuring 751.9 feet. So releases were necessary to control the rising waters in the lake. However, this water could only flow downstream into the Arkansas River. So, 250,000 cubic feet of water was discharged from the Keystone Dam each second. Did you hear that? 250,000 cubic feet per second. A National Weather Service reported the amount of water being released from the Keystone Dam as more than double the flow of Niagara Falls. John Lewis, senior forecaster with the NHWS office in Little Rock, said the high levels of rainfall in Oklahoma paired with the Keystone water releases are the primary factors in Arkansas's unprecedented flooding. So it wasn't Mother Nature at all. It was the Army Corps of Engineers that released all of this water from Keystone Lake, Sand Springs, Oklahoma, coming down the Arkansas River that flooded all the farmlands, destroyed people's property, washed their homes, destroyed their furniture, etc. So this was not an act of God. This was not Mother Nature as described by some. This was a willful, deliberate decision to save one area at the expense of another. Now, these kind of things are hard. I talked with this woman. We were visiting with her in her home. We helped supply her appliances and her furniture after her house, her dwelling was gutted and attempting to rebuild. Now, she's a Christian lady, and she was very thankful for the help that she has received. But she knows that this was not an act of God. It was not Mother Nature. It was a deliberate, willful decision by those who decided we've got to spare this place at the expense of another. Now, all this is going to come together as we continue and conclude. So stay tuned every day. All this week, we're going to talk about the war on the saints. Jesus said these things were the beginning of sorrows. Now, when we get to the shootings that took place in El Paso and Dayton, it's a horrible thing. It's a devastating, a destructive, overwhelming situation. But again, you're going to be able to see from the Scriptures what caused it, how it happened, and more importantly, is what can we do to prevent it in the future. Because our government has no solutions. All they do is bite and devour each other. It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. But the Bible plainly tells us what's going to happen and why it's happening and what we as believers can do about it. Now, let's go to the next issue that I want to address. And I was in Fort Worth, Texas in a conference, and I picked up the Wall Street Journal, and I saw an article here that said abortion curbs in Arkansas blocked. Now, I know a little bit about our legislature and some of our legislators and family council. They work very hard to save the lives of the unborn by passing pro-life legislation and stop the unnecessary killing of innocent babies. And so I read this article. The sole surgical abortion clinic in Arkansas was granted a brief reprieve after a federal judge temporarily blocked 3 laws restricting abortion only minutes before they were stated to take effect, likely forcing the clinic to close its doors. Now, that clinic is the only abortion clinic in Arkansas at this time. U.S. District Judge Christine Baker. Be sure and write that down so you won't so you can pray. Now, she was appointed by the Obama administration. And this is why it's so important to have God-fearing, pro-life, pro-Israel, pro-family people in high offices, because they appoint these lower court judges. And this is the power of a district judge, Christine Baker. She issued a 2-week restraining order. The laws that she temporarily stopped was a part of a raft of new legislation, anti-abortion legislation, pushed by Republican lawmakers around the country. This is taking place in other places: Arkansas, Ohio, Mississippi, Utah, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama. There is a real move to save the lives of these unborn children. The article goes on. Now, this is Wall Street Journal, July 25th. You can read it for yourself. The problem was that this law would have required around the country physicians providing abortions to be board certified or board eligible in obstetrics and gynecology, a mandate that would have led to the closure of Little Rock Family Planning Services, the only clinic providing surgical abortion in Arkansas. Now, the law that was suspended by Judge Baker said the laws cause ongoing and imminent irreparable harm to the plaintiffs and their patients at this time in the proceedings. Well, what about, and I'm not trying to be facetious here, but come on, give us a break. What about the ongoing, imminent, irreparable harm to the babies? Nobody even gives, credence to the fact that we are killing unborn babies. These are human beings that are murdered in the womb. It goes on to say, and of course the family planning clinic says they could not find any doctors that are, the article says, that they are board certified or eligible in obstetrics and gynecology. And it says these physicians in the state who would meet that standard are reluctant to perform these services, abortion, due to the stigma related to abortion in the South. They fear the negative repercussions from associating with an abortion clinic. Now, here you have another example of why it is so important to put the right people in office, because they're going to appoint these kind of judges. So, and let me give you the latest report. I just got this a few days ago. This is the latest report from Family Council, who was one of the agencies that helped pass some of this pro-life legislation. Arkansas, abortion in Arkansas is at a 42-year low. Now, we ought to thank God for Family Council and those that work. We ought to thank God for people like Rose Mims and Jerry Cox. We ought to thank God for people that stand up, for Senator Jason Rapert that proposed some of this legislation. We ought to thank God for these people. They're out there in fighting this good fight of faith to save the lives. Now, here's the good part. Here's the good news. While Arkansas abortions are down 42-year low, single pro-life law that they helped pass in 2015, this is Family Council, saved approximately 1,251 unborn children in the last 3 years. Thank you, Family Council. Thank you to everybody that has worked so hard to save these innocent children. Saved over 1,200 lives. Did you get that? There are 1,251 little children alive today that would have been murdered in the womb. I don't know how. I think the article plainly states that doctors are shying away from these abortion clinics now because they don't want to be associated with the stigma attached to killing babies. But I don't know why a judge would want to interfere with that, but she did. But we can counter this by continuing the pro-life fight and continuing to put people in office that are going to appoint pro-life judges. Now, the most recent issue that we're dealing with, and that is the mass murder, shootings, acts of, domestic terrorism, whatever you want to call it, in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. As I said, I want to show you the rest of the story. I want you to understand, because if you draw your conclusions and you make your decisions and you try to glean information from the secular media, social media, that the majority are all pro-death. They have their own agenda. I think one radio commentator called them the death works instead of the networks. They have an agenda. I keep saying this. Maybe one of these days you will get it. You'll realize that that's absolutely the truth. They're anti-American. They're anti-God, anti-Christianity, anti-Israel. They're against everything you're for. And so if you're getting your information from their reporting, you're being misinformed. Now, let me read you a recent blog that I got from our CUFI representative in Washington, D.C., Gary Bauer. Gary Bauer heads up his own organization called Campaign for Working Families. But he's also the CUFI representative in D.C., in our D.C. office, Christians United for Israel. And he sends out a blog every day, sometimes twice a day. His son works for Mike Pence. I've known him for many, many years. He was the former Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan's administration. So he's very knowledgeable. He's very involved. He's right there in D.C. every day. And let me remind you of a quote from Ronald Reagan as we get into this last commentary. Ronald Reagan said, "Faith in America must begin with faith in God." I'll say that again. Faith in America must begin with faith in God. Now, if you heard the president's response to the shootings, I won't go back over all of his explanation, but he said this, and I underline this. He said, "I urge every American." Now, this war that we're experiencing, and it's global. This war that we're experiencing, actually God is the target, but you and I are in the crosshairs. Believers, Christians, we're in the crosshairs. There was a war in heaven. We're going to read that this week. There was a war in heaven. And this war was when Satan tried to dethrone God. He tried to be God. And so this war is ongoing. And President Trump said he urged every American to work for a culture that celebrates the inherent worth and dignity of every human life. Now, regardless of what you think about him or his politics or party politics or whatever, I think this statement says a lot to us here. He urged every American, everybody, you, me, not just our politicians, not government, people, you. If we want the benefits of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, then we're going to have to take responsibility because it falls on us. The government that we have now is of the people, by the people, for the people. So every American have to work, W-O-R-K, work for a culture that celebrates worth and dignity of every human life. Now, the reaction, let me show you the reaction, because few people want to stand up and say it like it is or express a biblical worldview for fear of the criticism, the animosity, the hate. And the left's reaction, the liberal socialists' reaction. Beto O'Rourke, he accused the president of inciting violence, saying he's a racist, and he stokes racism in this country. Senator Amy Klobuchar accused the president of being a white nationalist. Now, let me tell you why. When people are angry, when there's hatred that is driving them, they have to focus on somebody to blame. And even if the blame is justified, the blaming game is not going to correct the problem. Okay, here's another comment. Representative Maxine Waters tweeted that the president cannot escape accepting blame for these killings in our country that are motivated by his race baiting. It gets worse. Progressive Democrats of America sent out an email blast over the weekend blaming President Trump for the white supremacist violence, declaring, "Yes, Mr. President, you had your finger on that AK-47. Ironically, many on the left have been crucifying the law of enforcement for years while rejecting any claim that their rhetoric could be linked to the growing number of assassinations. And there is debate right now over whether social media, the death works, the negative propaganda that's put out, the stealing, killing, and destroying. I used to know the numbers of thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of incidents of violence that go into our homes and our living rooms and our offices through television every day. And that's what our young people see. And they see the fighting and the bickering, and they see the murders and the gang violence. So you're growing up in a culture of violence. And they've statistically proven, even right here in our state, that the more you air these acts of violence, the more acts of violence occur. Because there is a certain amount of satisfaction that a domestic terrorist or a demented person or a violent person, angry person, gets by seeing their act on TV, seeing their face. It gives them credence. There are people that commit suicide, commit murders, just so they can wind up on television. And what that does is it speaks to other mentally ill, unstable people to do the same. So if the secular death works would stop putting all this stuff on TV and showing all the gory details, they might help. But I don't really think they're interested in helping, because that would take away from their agenda. Another comment here. The media said that the El Paso shooter was a racist who hated Hispanic immigrants. But there's much more than that. He expressed anger towards both political parties and corporate America. But no one blamed the anti-business rhetoric for the attack. He was a proponent of population control. But no one's blaming Planned Parenthood, because they say that's what they're about. He expressed alarm at climate change, farming, and oil drilling. But no one blamed the environmental movement for his attack. He worried about the impact of automation and American workers. What about the Dayton killer? He was a registered Democrat, an ardent socialist, and Satanist. And he was a supporter of Elizabeth Warren. But no one is blaming her for the Dayton murders. Don't lose sight of the bigger picture. The left and the media allies, I think of it this way, that the socialist media, the left media, the out-of-control secular media, is the arm, the vigilante arm of leftist politics. They're really attacking God, Christianity, the president. They are going after you and me and everyone else on the right by extension or by proxy. Let me add to this so you'll see the total big picture, because the problem is much bigger than El Paso or Dayton, even though that was horrible and terrible. I don't mean to minimize that. But similar atrocities are taking place fairly regularly in other major cities. Here's some of the info. And I'm going to go back to the most current date. The earliest date, May 28th, 17 shot, including 5 dead, in violent Memorial Day weekend in New Orleans. July the 8th, 6 killed, 66 hurt in July 4th weekend shootings in Chicago. July 23rd, 10 shot in Baltimore over the weekend, 2 dead. July 29th, 13 shot, 6 killed in Baltimore since Friday. July the 29th, 9 killed, 39 wounded in weekend shootings across Chicago. August 4th, at least 5 killed, 42 wounded in weekend shootings across Chicago. August 5th, Chicago Hospital stops accepting patients after trauma center is overwhelmed with shooting victims. So this is not just isolated incidents. This is, and we've seen uprisings in China. We've seen other nations experience it in London, England. This is happening globally. Now, on tomorrow's broadcast, I'm going to tell you why these things are happening and what the Bible says about it and what we can do about it as believers. Everyone has a responsibility to stop this, not just play the blame game. Government can't do this. Politicians can't do this. You have to do it. We're all responsible. So you join me tomorrow for Arkansas Alive, and we're going to continue with the beginning of sorrows. Remember, Jesus is Lord of Arkansas and where you're watching too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at Post Office Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com. Remember to follow VTN on Facebook at VTN Your Arkansas Christian Connection, and follow Happy Caldwell on Twitter at Happy_Caldwell. Today's episode is available to watch on demand at vtntv.com and click Watch. You can also watch VTN via live stream at vtntv.com.